I am here with another quote diagnosis video. And for today's quote diagnosis, I have picked Plutarch. So, who was Plutarch? He was a Greek Middle Platonist philosopher, biographer, essayist, and priest at the Temple of Apollo. Where was Plutarch raised? The small town of Chaeronea, about 80 kilometers east of Delphi in the Greek region of Boeotia. What were the thematic concentrations Plutarch focused on? 1. The influence of character. 2. Historical refination. And 3. The advent of severe criticism. So we'll get into the quotes now. This is the first quote. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. So, what I take Plutarch to be saying with this quote, by mentioning the vessel versus the fire, I think, personally, that he's saying that the mind is not outside of yourself, but it's within yourself, and if you think about kindling, you have to work, to produce a spark. And so Plutarch is kind of saying that the mind is like the spark that you produce, whilst you work. And so the more you work, the more sparks you produce. You get a fire, you get a bonfire, you get a conflagration of mind. So that's how I read that quote there. Next quote. I don't need a friend who changes when I change and who nods when I nod. My shadow does that much better. So, what Plutarch is saying here, I think is pretty straightforward, but basically, he's saying that he doesn't need, someone to call friend who just does exactly everything like him, right? It does everything exactly like him, He doesn't need a friend as in copycat, because his shadow does that. And it's that's a good point. A lot of a lot of the things that make the idea of community appealing is that there are people who bring different cards to the table, and if everybody brought the same cards to the table, well, you'd only have one hand to play, So yeah, that's what I think Plutarch is getting at with that quote. Next quote. A human body in no way resembles those that were born for ravenousness. It hath no hawk's bill, no sharp talon, no roughness of teeth, no such strength of stomach or heat of digestion as can be sufficient to convert or alter such heavy and fleshy fare. But if you will contend that you were born to an inclination to such food as you have now a mind to eat, do you then yourself kill what you would eat? But do it yourself without the help of a chopping knife, mallet, or axe, as wolves, bears, and lions do, who kill and eat at once. Rend an ox with thy teeth, worry a hog with thy mouth, tear a lamb or a hare in pieces, and fall on and eat it alive as they do. But if thou had rather stay until what thou eat is to become dead, and if thou art loath to force a soul out of its body, why then dost thou against nature eat an animate thing? There is nobody that is willing to eat even a lifeless and a dead thing, even as it is. So they boil it, and roast it, and alter it by fire and medicines, as it were, changing and quenching the slaughtered gore with thousands of sweet sauces, that the palate, being thereby deceived, may admit of such uncouth fare. So, what Plutarch is expressing there is, very much a it's very much from the point of view of, a vegetarian, or even a vegan mindset, though probably not a vegan mindset. But yeah, this is some intelligent, you know, vegetarian-like observation, and it is compelling if you don't take into consideration, all the adaptations that would have been made before human beings started to eat meat, before, you know, before our species. I mean, the early ancestors of our species started to eat meat. The thing about, how new, you know, activities come into being, the thing about how newness arrives into the world is through this process of admixture, meaning, you change one thing over here, it's going to, have an effect over here, and you don't know what that is. Now, maybe there was one point, I haven't, focused my reading on this subject, so bear with me and forgive any trespass of, expertise. Nobody's an expert, but I will make comment and say that because there's this issue of, you tweak something over here, and then something else over here happens, and you don't know what it is. I'm halfway assuming that is what, leads to many, customs, manners, behaviors, that, are not met by all. I think that, there's an alteration effect, whenever you think about it like this, okay? Are human beings supposed to eat with a knife and fork? Doesn't that get in the way of you, eating with your hands and feeling the texture of the food and the temperature of the food before you put it in your mouth? Surely, the knife and the fork are going to be deceiving you in a way, and, deceiving your senses, and, you know, and that's not good for how you are mechanically wired, so to speak. How your physiological mechanism works. That's not going to be very good. It's better to eat with your fingers, because then you can test the temperature, then you can, test the texture, and maybe you won't want to put certain food in your mouth if you've touched it with your, fingers. But, we can't do anything about how we were brought up as individuals. You become accustomed to, partaking in certain, in certain activities, using certain instruments, etc., etc. And I feel, I feel ideationally more in tune with using a knife and fork most of the time than I do with using my hands. And I know that sort of goes against natural inclination, but I think there's nurture is a powerful thing. And, I don't think it's fair to, if you do fall in line with what Plutarch is saying with this quote, I don't think it's fair to look at somebody else for their nurture and assume that that's their nature. And, but then again, there are other, complications when talking about, you know, vegetarianism, veganism, the change of diet, so to speak, because, some people have, you know, physiological issues where they can't, for their own health, adopt those diets. And so, you know, and that's probably due to admixture, as I was talking about. You change one thing over here, it changes something over here you don't know about. And there's so many mystery adaptations that occurred because somebody made this one alteration here, and so it's an alteration effect, basically. But what Plutarch is basically saying with this quote is, he's commenting on how, if it's on a, he's commenting on well, he's not really commenting so much as he's questioning. He's questioning, how justifiable, human beings eating meat is. And look, that's it's fair to question that. But like I said, it's the byproduct of admixture. You can't blame someone who's affected by nurture for their nurturing. People don't nurture themselves, and you can't re-nurture yourself once you're nurtured. And the answer isn't to shame then. The answer is to, okay, let's see how we can work around this. That's the answer. And maybe it takes, 1,000 more years to invent new technology to work around the thing, but that's what you do. Anyway, that's my personal opinion on that sort of division, that sort of thing. Next quote. An imbalance between rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. So, what Plutarch is saying here, in my opinion, is that disparity is, disparity equals, social destruction of a collective body. So, think about, if you look at videos of, ongoing meetings in Parliament, and you see people, at least in my country, New Zealand, you see people, who are supposed to be these respectable politicians, some of the time yelling at one another and acting, makes you want to roll your eyes out of your head, But what that is due to is because, there is disparity. And that, but even up there at that elite political level, or what we assume is elite, ideally, it's a petty disparity at that level. But even a petty disparity, even, oh, this guy made $100 more than me, doing the same job. Oh, well, did the earth crack open? Is everyone being swallowed inside to melt at the core of the earth and just become lava? It's basically, I guess this quote by Plutarch is sort of it's not saying this, but it's alluding to, you know, the notion that you should have equals in charge of a republic. That you should have, people who are, you should have equality in the, in the governance role, but, you know, not necessarily, at every other tier of the social hierarchy, but I think that's what it's alluding to. Not saying, though, make that clear. Anyway, next quote. Know how to listen, and you will profit even from those who talk badly. So, Plutarch is saying here that you should pay attention, essentially. You know, pay attention and focus on not just what is being said, but how it's being said, the tone, the inflections in the tone of speaking voice, the the visual cues of the gestures when one speaks. Focus on it all. Know how to listen, and you will profit, even from those who talk badly, because if you are really paying attention to somebody, you're going to learn. You're going to learn them. You're going to learn this other person, and that gives you a leg up in this world. Anyway, next quote. To find fault is easy. To do better may be difficult. So, what Plutarch is saying here, in my opinion, is that it's easy to point the finger. A tongue can accuse and carry bad news. The seeds of distrust it will sow. But unless you've made no mistakes in your life, be careful of stones that you throw. Those are some Hank Williams lyrics, but it sort of falls into what I'm saying about this quote. To find fault is easy. It's always easy to figure out who has attracted your anger, who has attracted your indignation, your outrage. It's another thing entirely to do better than that person in the same position. It's very easy to say, oh, well, this leader of the world is, failing at their job. But then, if the very next moment you were elected to be the new leader of the world, you may not fare any better. You may do worse than that person. So, a tongue can accuse and carry bad news. The seeds of distrust it will sow. But unless you've made no mistakes in your life, be careful of stones that you throw. Listen to Hank Williams and listen to Plutarch there. Next quote. The poor go to war to fight and die for the delights, riches, and superfluities of others. So, what Plutarch is saying here, the way I understand it, is he's making a commentary on the fact, so the perception. So in this case, an observation. That is informing him. He's making commentary that the poor youth, so to speak, or just the poor in general, are fighting the wars, but they're not not the ones profiting off of any victory or profiting off of any defense as much as or at all, compared to the elites of the society. And so he talks about, how the poor are not dying for, their delights, for their riches, or for their superfluities, but for other people, middle class and higher class, They're dying for the elevator. Anyway, next quote. The whole of life is but a moment of time. It is our duty, therefore, to use it, not to misuse it. So, what Plutarch is saying here is he's noticing the importance of time as it consists of all things, so to speak. Time can be seen as, this fundamental property, although it's not physical per se, but with your time, you can actually, change the world, you can restructure, you can reorganize, and you can make, things more efficient, more effective, better, essentially. And so Plutarch is sort of saying that it's your duty, therefore, to use your time, and instead of misusing it, instead of you sitting around procrastinating, acting like your time has been missed. It's missing somewhere. You don't have the time to do this, do that. You should just get on it. Just get on it. Just do it. Even if what you can do isn't going to be of the same quality as you imagine, just do it. Just battering ram. Just go for it. Next quote. Can you really ask what reason Pythagoras had for abstaining from flesh? For my part, I rather wonder both by what accident and in what state of soul or mind the first man did so, touched his mouth to gore and brought his lips to the flesh of a dead creature, he who set forth tables of dead, stale bodies, and ventured to call food and nourishment the parts that had a little before bellowed and cried, moved and lived. How could his eyes endure the slaughter when throats were slit and hides flayed and limbs torn from limb? How could his nose endure the stench? How was it that the pollution did not turn away his taste, which made contact with the sores of others and sucked juices and serums from mortal wounds? It is certainly not lions and wolves that we eat out of self-defense. On the contrary, we ignore these and slaughter harmless, tame creatures without stings or teeth to harm us. Creatures that, I swear, nature appears to have produced for the sake of their beauty and grace, but nothing abashed us. Not the flower-like tinting of the flesh, not the persuasiveness of the harmonious voice, not the cleanliness of their habits, or the unusual intelligence that may be found in the poor wretches. No, for the sake of a little flesh we deprive them of sun, of light, of the duration of life to which they are entitled by birth and being. So, Plutarch could have been a Peter spokesperson, pretty passionate, and again, what he's saying, it's definitely contextually, it's definitely contextually accurate from his point of view. But it's, again, like the other quote, talking about the same stuff, it's not taking into account admixture and how that affects adaptation and the alteration effect. But it's interesting. It's an interesting quote because you can tell that Plutarch was he grew up to identify with all, walks of life, truly, and that, that is admirable, and yeah, this is a passionate and, very well thought out, um, questioning of the justification of eating meat, and I think that, it's worth some thought, but again, I will say, like I did with the last quote like this, that you want to be careful that you're not attacking somebody else for a nurture that they couldn't control. I want to make that clear. Anyway, yeah, but he's basically saying that the way it impresses upon him, is that these animals, they are akin in harmonious behavior, and or the like, and that is, that might be telling, people that it's wrong to eat them. Again, there have been, um, studies, and there's been progress, from this exact attitude, because some people have deficiencies, and they can't survive without consuming meat. But again, I will say again that, those deficiencies are probably the result of the alteration effect of, change something over here, and then something mysteriously changes over here, and you can't pinpoint what it is, and anyway. Next quote: neither blame or praise yourself. So this is, Plutarch is saying, here, in other words, keep a level head. Don't think you're up here, and don't think you're down here. But keep a level head. Be honest with yourself, and look at yourself that way. Next quote: adversity is the only balance to weigh friends. So, what Plutarch is getting at here, in my opinion, is that, the true, not the true, but the real test of a friendship is when there's a challenge that you both, you both have something at stake, and you've got to remain friends. You've got to remain, loyal, to see that to see that you pass through this obstacle, undefeated, undestroyed. Next quote: character is simply habit long continued. So, Plutarch is saying here that what we look up to, in other words, role models, and we see, oh my God, this person, someone or other, it's just, they are so ideal that, like, oh my God, Kylie's lips. That's, but that was a little joke, but, Plutarch is basically saying that that ideal, that role model, that character is simply habit long continued. Somebody's just, you know, gotten up, and they just, and then they went through the whole routine, and, they got ready, and that character is the result of habitual getting ready and brushing up and combing and, you know, cleaning and powdering the nose, while you stare in your mirror that's draped, and, you have the other, can you do the can girls behind you getting ready, and you're about to go on stage, and that entire number you're going to do, that's going to inspire some, you know, eighth grade or whatever. That entire number, that's just habit. It's just practice. That's what makes it. That's what I think Plutarch is saying there anyway. The next quote. It is certainly desirable to be well descended, but the glory belongs to our ancestors. Yeah. So, what Plutarch is getting at here with this quote is that, yes, it's certainly, beneficial to have a good name, might get you in the door, but the worth of that name, the glory of that name, you know, it belongs to your ancestors. It belongs to, the people who earn the fame for that name. Essentially, that's what he's saying. Next quote. Books delight to the very marrow of one's bones. They speak to us, consult with us, and join with us in a living and intense intimacy. So, what Plutarch is saying there is in my opinion, is he's making a commentary on how, one's relationship with a book is, especially with a good book. And that how, a certain intimacy is developed, There's the old notion of the words came off of the page. It's like, and they projected an image, a picture, a movie in literary form. And this movie is an intimacy, essentially. This journey of getting from, this bookend to the other bookend is a journey of intimacy. Next quote. Do not speak of your happiness to one less fortunate than yourself. So basically, Plutarch is saying, don't rub it in there, Next quote. To be ignorant of the lives of the most celebrated men of antiquity is to continue in a state of childhood all our days. So, Plutarch is basically saying here, in my opinion, that to ignore, the people who sort of cultivated your community, the people who have days named after them, who have streets named after them, to ignore the lives of these people and the lessons that their lives hold for you is to still be a child. Basically, you don't have to look at, your roots. You don't have to look at, how your luxuries, whether they be small or large, how your luxuries, came about. There's a lot of brutality in the past. There's a lot of, hard-won battles, where people were beheaded, where people, had their, guts, you know, um, struck out of them, cut out of them with swords, and there's a lot of bloody and gory history that decorates your entire life. And, what Plutarch is saying here is basically you're choosing to stay a child by not venturing to actually learn about that, you know? And those that don't learn their history, are doomed to repeat it. Anyway, next quote. Of all the disorders in the soul, envy is the only one no one confesses to. Now, this is a very interesting quote, in my opinion. And, if we think about, disorder, it's distance of order. So if you think about that in connection with envy, because envy isn't jealousy. Jealousy is personal. You know this person, and hence you're jealous. But it's particularized. Envy is it's not particularized. It's just it's a general feeling of wanting what you don't have, what you see somebody else has. But disorder, distance of order, in the soul is it is that vision you have for that you want to manifest. And so, of all the distances of order in the soul, envy is the only one no one confesses to. And so envy is a distance of order. So that's an interesting thing about this Plutarch quote. Because if you think about envy being a distance of order, well, what could it be? What could it be a distance of order of? What could it be a distance of order of? So, a disorder in the soul as opposed to of the soul. So, the soul being a vision that you would like to manifest. Envy is a distance of order in that vision. So, envy as a distance of order in that vision you want to manifest. I guess envy would arise if what general leveling up, so to speak, or general progressions, speaking very general here, what general progressions, envy as a disorder in the soul, as a distance of order in the soul, would mean, that the general progressions are further away. They're out of order, so to speak. You haven't made those general progressions. And so go with me here, follow me here. So of all the disorders in the soul, envy is the only one no one confesses to. Well, that means, people, there's nothing people want to save more than face, essentially. Everybody wants to act, pretend, and I mean everybody, even myself from time to time, I want to act and pretend like I'm already at the peak, I'm already at the pinnacle, I'm already at the precipice, I am just like everybody else, I'm just as good as everybody else, don't look at me, I made it to the finish line, I am at the same level. People really want to lose face, and that face, that persona, that they are, that they're just like everybody else in terms of, not in terms, but in condition of progress for their age, right? And nobody wants to lose face. Nobody wants to lose face. Everybody wants to save face, because losing face would mean, well, you have to admit that, you're a 42-year-old woman who, has, didn't finish her schooling, or you're a 52-year-old man who's still a virgin. You know what I'm saying? You would, you're, that envy is, that's born from the general progressions you haven't made, and it may not be your fault. Most of the time it's not people's fault. It's just it's an effect of their nurture. It's an effect of how they were raised, if they were raised. Raising requires the parents raise themselves, in order to raise the child. And so a lot of people were not raised, and and a lot of people feel like they have to pretend like they were, that they have to, put on the false front, so to speak. But yeah, this is an interesting Plutarch quote, and it's an observation, that most people, they don't want to confess to, their predicament of envy. They don't want to confess that they are behind, on the general progressions of life for somebody their age, or, and for somebody their ethnicity, and for somebody their, sex, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You can think of more, things to connect to that point, but you get the point. Okay, now the next quote and the final quote. To make no mistakes is not in the power of man, but from their errors and mistakes the wise and good learn wisdom for the future. So what Plutarch, I think, is saying here is that you're going to make blunders. You're going, because you are not a perfect, sentient, brilliant mind of minds. Because you still have to learn, that you still have obstacles. But there's a difference between, someone who takes nothing away from the challenges, they're faced with, and somebody who learns ultimately what those challenges are conditioning them for and preparing them for, you know? And so, it's, you know, the wise and the good learn wisdom for the future from their mistakes. Anyway, so that was the quote diagnosis for Plutarch. And if you have any suggestions for future quote diagnosis videos, leave them in the comment section. And have a good day. Peace, meow,